Baroness Sue Campbell, who is the FA's Director of Women's Football. Absolute honour. Thank you for joining us, Sue. Good morning, welcome. And first of all, how are you?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much. November is always a tough time of year for me. I find the dark mornings and dark. I think I must have that light issue. I love to be outdoors, and I found it really difficult. But yeah, no, all well. Thank you.
Good. I'll have a personal plug. It's my birthday later this week, so I'm always used to this sort of weather and not being able to do much to celebrate. But there you go, time of the year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you straight back to your youth, if you don't mind, so we can get into your backgrounds. Where did your passion for sport come from as you were growing up?
I think it was always there. I mean, I lived in, as you can see from my grey hair, it's a long time ago, but I lived in a time when kids played in the streets a lot of the time, and I was lucky enough to live in a street that had some trees, so I spent my life either climbing trees, roller skating with a boy called Brian Carrier, or playing football with Brian and Jeffrey, and I can't remember Jeffrey's surname now, but so I was outdoors from very, very early age, and my parents, my father particularly, was mad keen on cricket and would come home from work and we'd play cricket in the back garden, even in the pitch black. So we didn't have a very big garden. Mrs. North used to get all the balls over the fence. She used to be very cross. But yeah, that's where it started. I just loved being outside. I still do. You know, if I'm stressed or I'm tired or I'm struggling, going out walking is my, get out in the fresh air and walk helps me enormously. So my love of the outdoors, my love of being active just seemed to be part of who I was from a very early age.
That's a good point, isn't it? Getting outdoors to clear your head. Now, obviously, you've just mentioned a small variety of sports there, but I understand that perhaps you had a flair for netball. How big a part did netball play in your life in those days?
Well, to be honest, my first real love was football. And I very naughtily skipped school quite a bit to go and play football with the boys at the nearby school, because I was at a school further in. I used to jump off the bus early and play football. So my first real love was football, and I played football till I was 10, 11. I loved it. And then, of course, I went to secondary school, and in my day, secondary schools didn't offer football. They only offered netball and hockey. And I loved hockey because it was very similar to football. And then playing netball, I just found it such an easy game to play. I couldn't explain why. It felt really natural to me. I loved the sort of athleticism of it, but I also loved the really competitive nature of it. So yes, I went on to captain England under 21s and then played for the senior team for quite a number of years. I'll be honest, at the senior level, I was never first choice. I warmed a lot of benches all over the world. But I loved it. I loved the game. I look back now and I realised just, what an incredible time I had travelling to the West Indies, to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. It was extraordinary. That's where we went on tour. So yeah, it was a brilliant education. I still have friends who I played with. I think that's one of the great things about sport. You make friends for life. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
In what way would you say visiting all those different countries sort of helped you develop as a person?
I think my father was a great believer in travel. Even in, the days when most people holidayed here at home, he would every summer throw us into the back of a car and take us somewhere, whether it was France or drive all the way through France to Switzerland. I remember doing that a couple of times because he'd take us where Joan of Arc, was burnt at the stake and all of these things. And it kind of makes history and come alive, but it also gives you an insight into different cultures and different people. So when we went to South Africa with the netball team, one of the reasons we were allowed to go, because apartheid was still there, was that we had to commit to run training camps for young people in the townships. And because I was the PE trained person and the others weren't, they used to ship me off with a bag of balls into the middle of the desert or wherever I was taken. And then all these kids would appear. And I think, you know, it was the beginning of me really understanding about sport changing lives and appreciating, you know, you really begin to appreciate what you have when you see what other people don't have. And you can talk about that and you can watch it on the telly, but when you're actually next to it and you feel it, and you see young people who are deprived of food, deprived of home, as we would think of it, and yet still are joyful and get a joy out of life, it kind of gets you to see life in perspective. So traveling for me, and meeting people from different cultures and being with people with very different needs helped broaden my understanding of, you know, I was just a kid who'd grown up in what I thought was an ordinary family, a mum, a dad and a sister, went on holidays every year, went to school, could almost, you know, guarantee I could play whatever sport I wanted to. I thought that was what everybody had in life. I didn't realize just how tough life could be. So it's a great education for me.
Yeah, I speak to a lot of our students who have a desire to travel, so it's lovely to hear you reinforcing how important that is. So I'm gonna pick you up in a minute on PE, but before we do that, I just want to take you back because I'd like to try and paint a picture. We've got a mostly very young audience today. You know, our undergrad students will be 18, 19, 20. We do have our postgrad students joining us on the call, which is great, but they wouldn't understand a world where girls didn't really play football, or it wasn't expected them to play football. When we think of how, you know, prevalent the game is now for women, can I just ask you to give us a snapshot of what life was like for a young girl like you who was keen on football but didn't really have the opportunities to play it? It wasn't the done thing, was it?
No, and you know, I think even now, if you look at the present senior England women's team and you talk to Steph Houghton or you talk to Karen Carney, I know Karen's now retired, but only just, or you talk to any of those people, they'll tell you even their era, and that was a long way past my era. You know, what they did that I didn't do was have the sort of tenacity and courage, if you like, to chop their hair short, call themselves Fred, and go and play in a men's team. And that's what Karen did. It's what Steph did. It's what Lucy Bronze had to do. And if you talk to Kelly Smith, you know, our prolific scorer, I suppose the equivalent of our David Beckham in men's football, Kelly, absolutely a phenomenal talent. Kelly gets still emotional at how difficult it was. She would join a boys' team, and of course she was so prolific, she'd score all the goals, and then all the parents would complain this girl was playing, and she'd get thrown out the team, then she'd go and find another team, and she still gets quite emotional about how wrong that was, that a girl could not do what was burning inside her. I think for me, because I'd got such an array of sport that I did, whilst I was very focused on football for school, I was ice skating, I was doing a myriad. My dad was making me play tennis, which I'm still terrible at. You know, I was doing a whole range of things, going swimming, that although I got deprived of one thing, it wasn't my only thing. Whereas if you talk to Kelly or Steph, it was the only thing that they really had this burning desire to do. So it's wrong. You know, I believe girls and women should have whatever ambition they want in life, whether that's for work or for sport. You know, they want to be an astronaut, they should be an astronaut. There shouldn't be some barrier that says, well, women don't do that. That's not right in the society in which we live. If you have the desire, you have the talent, you have the ability, you should be able to do it. So for me, you know, one of our ambitions is that by 2024, we will have equal opportunities for girls to play football in our schools. And we're making massive progress. I mean, we're in something like 12,000 schools now. You know, our ambition is not that we want to force everybody to play football, because not everybody's going to want to play football, but we want to give those girls that have that desire to have that opportunity and to see a clear pathway if they want to follow it.
That's spot on, and I think for me, and I've experienced this myself, is I quite often come up against or come alongside women who are better at certain jobs than men, and so how dare we deprive them of doing those jobs? They're equally as good or better, and it's good that we are making these changes.
I think it's different. I'm not a great lover of trying to say women are better or men are better. I enjoy working with men and I enjoy working with women. but it is different. And I think, you know, we talk about diversity, but there's diversity of thinking as well as all the other elements of diversity. And I think men and women think and approach most issues differently, and together they're really powerful. And so I'm really pro, you know, letting women do what they want to, but recognizing they'll come at it a different way. And if you expect women to come at it the same way as men, you're going to judge them as not being good enough. But that's not how we should judge people. We should judge them on the outcome and the results and what they're capable of, not whether they do it the way it's always been done.
Brilliant, absolutely. So I promised I'd just take you back, because one of our many sports-related degrees is physical education, and you obviously were trained there. Can you give us an insight into how rewarding, how enriching that type of career is, to encourage our youngsters in the audience that are hoping to have a career in that area?
Well, first of all, my 3 years, because it was 3-year teacher training in my day, was without question an unbelievable professional foundation, which has stood me in good stead, not just in teaching, but in lecturing and on into life. So I'm really grateful for those 3 years. But my first teaching job was in Moss Side, Manchester. And I went there because my father, when I was taking my first teaching job, was a Mancunian, a very strong Lancashire lad. He used to say cook and book, look at the book. He was really keen. I went to where he'd been born, Manchester, for my teaching job. He was dying of cancer, so that's what I did. I applied for a job. I got a job at a school called Whalley Range, and it had a good reputation. But the year I went into teaching was the year of comprehensive education, and Whalley Range combined with Moss Side Secondary, which was up the road. And the head teacher, in her wisdom, decided to keep all the grammar school teachers with the upper school and leave all the secondary modern teachers with the lower school, as she saw it. And some of the upper school students were, I think you can describe them as challenging. And it was really interesting. It was the first time I really understood the power of the PE department. There was something about the relationship you have with children in PE that you don't have in other subjects. Now, I know some of that's about your personality and who you are, and I understand that. But there is a different relationship. And I learned, you know, I went into that thinking my job was to teach netball, hockey, tennis and athletics. And I learned very quickly my job was to teach children. And I had to listen and not assume. So, you know, I'd my little lesson plans done and my shoes polished and all the rest of it. But if they didn't want to do it, there was absolutely, I wasn't going to drag 4 who were 15-year-olds, all black, from inner city Manchester. They didn't do netball, thank you very much. I had to kind of negotiate, well, what do you do? Now, I know that wasn't in the manual of teaching, you know, you make them go out there. But actually what I discovered was by empowering them, developing one of them who was a very challenging young woman in all sorts of difficulty with police and earning a living on the streets of Manchester. But by converting her into my leader, my support, we were able to do some really incredible things. And what I would say to anybody sitting there now is don't underestimate either the importance of physical education, because sometimes head teachers might not see it as important as you do. Don't underestimate it, and don't for one moment think that in your hands you have a tool that can truly change lives. And I know other subjects would say, you know, learning more about geography or maths. That's not what I'm talking about. You can change lives. And it is, I think, just so important, particularly today with our young people's health and well-being and the stresses and the strains and all the time they spend on laptops and computers. PE has never been more important. It's a really important job, and it's a job, if you get hold of it in the right way, where you can help young people do better in life through what you do. And that is, gosh, there's nothing more important.
You talk obviously there about how you need to be adaptable, and you talked earlier about the power of thinking. When my colleague Simon and I were doing our research to come up with some questions for you, one of the interesting things I read was about how you turned up for a netball session expecting a big turnout, and it didn't happen. And it said that you turned to teaching dance because that's what you knew was going to get them motivated. So tell us that story, because it can highlight how you do need to think outside the box.
Well, this was, I sort of partly referred to just now, but this was my first lesson as a new teacher. We're on a split site, remember? The bell goes, I'm stood there with my clipboard, my bag of balls, my white shoes, and nobody comes. Nobody. And now I'm panicked. Am I on the wrong site? Have I read the timetable wrong? So I start to go up the corridor to find the master schedule, timetable. And I hear this noise in the toilet. And my brain sort of computes, I wonder. I go into the toilet and there is my class, all having a fag. Now, in the 3 years I was trained as a teacher, no one told me what you did and you walked in to your class and your class was all in the toilet having a cigarette. And I didn't know what to do. I know I should have shouted, or I should have done something. I should have been I couldn't. I almost felt like I was going to faint. One, the panic of being in the wrong place, as I thought, and then the panic of finding. So I actually sat on the floor in the toilet. And one of the girls, my leader in the future, walked over to me and said, "Hey, miss, you look awful. Do you want a fag?" And I said, "Oh, it's very kind, but no, I don't smoke." And I thought, what am I doing? I'm sitting on if anybody comes in here now, I'm dead, right? And then I started to talk to them. I said, aren't you meant to be in PE with me? We don't do PE, they say. I said, well, did you do PE down? No, they used to leave us alone. So I said, well, I would really like to get you to do something. I said, is there anything you like doing? And they said, no, not really. I said, well, do you go clubbing? And they went, oh, yeah, we go clubbing. I said, do you dance? They said, yeah. I said, well, how about I get some music, or maybe you bring the music, I'll get something, and you can come and dance. There's only 2 rules. You've got to come and you've got to take your shoes off because we've got one of those parquet floors, right? Other than that, won't make you change. And they all said, are you for real? I said, yeah, I'm for real. So they came down and that's what we did. And for a couple of weeks, they just danced. Very boring. I sat on mats in the corner doing other lesson plans. And I was thinking, gosh, I hope nobody walks in here, because I would have been dead, I'm sure, had they done. And after 2 weeks, the same person who offered me the cigarette walked over and said, we're bored. I said, I'm not surprised. Could we form a dance group? Anyway, to cut the long story short, they formed a dance group. She did most of the teaching. She was a better teacher, let me tell you, than I was. I helped her, supported her. And they won pretty well every competition in Manchester for nearly a year. And it transformed them. It transformed those young women from rebellious, naughty, poorly behaved into a coordinated group of people who had ambition, who were praised, who put on shows that got accolades, and all at once their self-esteem went up, their self-belief went up, their naughty behavior dropped down, which is obviously what happens when people start to feel better about who they are. And on they went, to some of them, to have really constructive and great careers. So yeah, that was just, I would like to say that was clever on my part, but it wasn't. It was desperation. And it was just finding my way. And I think that's true in any job. When you start it, you might think you know what the job is, but you've got to work through the difference between, the role you think you've got and your purpose. And for me, the role and the purpose have been something I've really focused on in every job I've got. There's a very clear role I've got, but right underpinning it is, what is my purpose? And my purpose in teaching PE was to change lives and help young people get on better in life.
Well, I think you deserve the credit for thinking on your feet, although you were sitting on the toilet floor. But I just want to add to that, because I read a really, really interesting quote, and I'm not sure if you said it or you just used it to highlight, but related to that story. It says, there are millions of people for whom sport is not their first love, but if you can deliver it in the right way and listen, you can help them enrich their lives. So it sounds as though sport is absolutely key to enriching people's lives. And we're all joined today, everyone in the audience, by our passion to want to work in some sporting capacity.
Yeah, no, look, I you know, without trying to get on my favorite hobby horse, I don't think I don't think governments generally appreciate the power of sport to affect real change in society. You know, and I mean, you only have to look at the present cricket row to understand that those issues that happen generally in society all over the place can be highlighted in sport. They can be brought to the attention of people in sport. And if sport is brave enough and strong enough, it can begin to tackle some of those issues. You know, I think when we get criticisms about racism in football, my point is there is racism in society. Our job in football is to stand up and say, no, we don't accept that. We will not accept that. But we can't expect football to somehow be better than the whole of society. You know, we at the gates when people walk in, we can't say, well, because you come into a football match, you stop behaving like you normally behave, because you can't do that. So, but what we can do through our game and through standing up for what we believe in, we can actually say, no, this is not acceptable. And cricket are going to go through a tough time here, but to see it as cricket's issue is not understanding it's a societal issue, which is being reflected in cricket. Cricket will clean up, I'm sure, very quickly what it needs to clean up. But do we clean up society in the same way? Or do we use sport as a beacon to say, we can take on some of these massive issues in society and we can say, this is not how we want to conduct ourselves. That's why the way we play our sport, the way we coach our sport, the way we conduct ourselves is so important. Not because we want to be better than everybody else, that would be a nonsense, but we want to say sport stands for something that can transform and change society as a whole. Politicians don't get it, so it's down to those of us in sport to get it and to make sure that we speak as loudly as we can against those things that are wrong in society.
As again, so apt. I think, you know, we need these sporting heroes to be role models as well, don't we? And if they are role models and set the right example, as you say, they're addressing issues in society, not just issues in their particular sport. So that's really key. Absolutely. Yeah. So you're obviously, your career took a turn, which meant that you moved into sports governance. And I noted, I think it was in the 1980s, your first role was the Sports Council of Great Britain, but that was one of the first of many. What I wonder is, did you sort of have a vision or a desire yourself to get women's sport on the map? Because like we mentioned, with girls not being able to play football early on, or it was frowned upon, you've had an impact in helping to put women's sport on the map. Was that the start of your journey, would you say?
I'd say I've sort of had a bit of a schizophrenic personality, really. That experience at Whalley Range definitely shaped me, and that desire to use sport as a tool for change has stayed with me. So if you go through my career, you'll see I do teaching, lecturing. I go into Loughborough, and there I developed this incredible fascination with excellence. So I've got sport changing lives, and now I've suddenly developed a real interest in. And, you know, I'm at Loughborough at a time when Clive Woodward, Seb Coe, Dave Moorcroft were all students, right? And I'm intrigued by what is making these people as good as they are, and how do you search for that excellence? And I was coaching our netball team, who was beating everybody and all the rest of it, but I was intrigued by it. So I've got this sport changes lives mission inside me, and then this intellectual fascination with excellence. So I go from lecturing in Loughborough to doing 4 years working in the inner city. Everybody thought I was bonkers because everybody thought I'd stay at Loughborough forever. I go and do 4 years in the inner city. That was Whalley Range coming back. And in that inner city time, I worked with sport as a tool for development, with the elderly, with women in high-rise buildings, with the unemployed, not just women, just generally working and recognising where it could really be a tool for improvement. Then I go to the National Coaching Foundation. And so I go back to this excellence sort of intellectual thing. How do we train coaches to get the very best out of everybody? And the National Coaching Foundation was a sort of series of, I used to call it a market stall of education. All the ologies that we now take for granted, you know, sports science, sports medicine, psych, all of that broken down into bite-sized chunks for coaches, and working with coaches from mum and dad through to our coaches working at the very top, the Frank Dicks of this world, the John Sheddens, the Jeff Gleasons. I can remember them all vividly. I then go back to the Youth Sport Trust, which is again about changing lives, using sport, PE, to affect change, not just for girls, for everybody. And then I swing back into UK sport, which is about our Olympic and Paralympic medals. So did I have a vision where I was going? No. Did I have a recurring passion for working with young people and then searching out this intellectual kind of restlessness about how did you create excellence? How could you go from 10th in the medal table to where did we got to, which was 3rd in the medal table by London? You know, those two parts of my life have sort of intertwined and swapped places. So I didn't have any notion where I was going. There wasn't a UK sport when I was at the age your students are at, so I couldn't have had some ambition that that's where I was headed. I just pursued, to be fair, I pursued passions, and I had two. One was how many lives could have changed through sport, and the other was could I search out this restless need I had in my head to find out how you created excellence in sport. And I've been blessed that I've been able to bob between those two. And I guess in football, they've come together because I'm responsible for everything from our grassroots work to working with Serena and the England women's team. So my two worlds are now in one place, which is kind of really nice for me and has been very enjoyable bringing those two very different but you know, overlapping drivers of my life together.
Brilliant. So I'm going to move on to your work at the FA, but before I do that, just for our students in the audience, we're actually almost halfway through. It's going so quickly for me, but just to remind everybody, this is a private webinar with Baroness Sue Campbell, the FA's Director of Women's Football. Please tweet about it or whatever social media platforms you use to let us know you enjoy it. Give us your feedback, but please, we just ask our students not to repeat anything Sue says because it's a private webinar for UCFB students and GIS, of course. The FA now, the FA launched the Game Plan for Growth Blueprint, and it's designed to double participation. Tell us about that, your involvement. How's it going? Is it hitting its targets?
Well, like many of the jobs that I've ended up doing, I when I finished at UK Sport, I think you can tell by my age, I thought it was time to go and play some golf or something. And then I got a phone call from Martin Glenn. And I said, no, I didn't want a full-time job. No, I was done with that. Anyway, he eventually persuaded me on the basis I'd do 3 days a week. This is now a joke, by the way, in the FA. 3 days a week, working from home, not sitting on lots of groups, right? Don't want to do any of that. I'll do you a strategy. I'll get some good people in place. I'll get it kicked off. And then I'm off to the golf course. Well, that was now 5.5 years ago. I now do 7 days a week, it feels like. So what I did when I first came in, I know sport because I've lived my life through it and I've been in lots of it, but I didn't take the judgment that I knew football, because I think it's always when you first come in a job, particularly when you've had a set of experiences, whilst they are something that helps you learn and develop as a person, you can't just carry them into the next job. What you've got to do is kind of redefine yourself again and have a look. So I took probably 6 months. Martin kept saying, is that a strategy written yet? And I kept saying, no. And he kept saying, is it coming soon? I kept saying, yes. But I wanted to listen. So I spent 6 months listening. So I met some of what I'd call the old pioneers of the women's game. I met the people that were already in the FA. I looked at what progress we'd made. I looked at what was going on in the world generally, particularly in the US, because obviously that's where it has great momentum. And then I went to Martin and said, right, I'm not ready to write a strategy. And he said, blimey, you've wasted 6 months of your life. I said, no. I said, I'm ready to write a plan, but I'm not going to call it a strategy, because I think we need to do 3 things. And he said, okay, what are they? I said, 1, we've got to drive the ambition to get more people playing our game. He said, okay. 2, we've got to market it and raise its profile so that more people see it, more eyes are on the game, and it starts to become. And 3, we've got to tackle the high performance piece. We've got to get ourselves into the semi-finals, finals of the major tournaments so that we're visible. And he said, okay. I said, and that's it. I'm not doing the rest. There'll be bits that people say, well, why aren't you doing something for the older woman? And why aren't you doing this? I said, we've just got to crack on and do these 3 things. So we wrote that in and I say we because it wasn't just me. We wrote that in 2017. It was a 3-year, 4-year plan. In that time, so it was a 3-year plan. In that time, we did double participation. We more than doubled the fan base. Not necessarily in terms of people coming through the gates to the game, but in terms of eyes on the game, just phenomenal change. And we got ourselves to the semi-final of the World Cup in 2019, and then lost to our friends, the United States. So then I said, at this point now, of course, Martin is going and Mark is coming in. I said, now I'm ready to write a strategy. So we've now written a strategy, which is called Inspiring Positive Change. It's the strategy for 2020 to 2024. And it completely embraces everything from how people get into the game, the journey they take through the game, whether that's as a recreational player, a competitive player, or an elite player. And so the new strategy has been launched, and we are busy working very hard putting it on the ground.
And one of the things that has been set, one of the targets that's been set, is for the England women's team to win the 2023 World Cup, which is not that far ahead. I just, from my own experience, I was fortunate to be part of the press ops team for the London 2012 Olympics, working on football. And at the risk of being controversial, I didn't see a lot of great standard of football back in those days, but the standard has come on massively, and it's an absolute joy to watch the women's game now. How much pressure have you put on everybody, really, by setting targets like that, and why do you do it?
It's a good question. Well, it's a little bit like when I went into UK sport and we were 10th in the medal table, and I asked my colleagues, was 10th good? And they all said, yeah. I said, why is that? I said, well, we were 36th on the medal table in Atlanta. And I said, I've never wanted to be 10th in my life. So that can't be our ambition. Being 10th can't be an ambition. So we could say, we're happy to finish in the top 6, or we're happy to make quarterfinals, but that isn't an ambition. And I think, you know, these players we have, these women we have playing the game at the moment, many of whom have really battled to be at the level they are and battled all sorts of social challenges that we were talking about earlier. They deserve to be on this stage, and they deserve a real shot at winning a major tournament. And that's what we want to do. So it isn't about pressure in the set. I mean, if you don't like pressure, you really can't compete at the world level. You've got to love it. You've got to be able to take that adrenaline, that anxiety, that stress feeling, and turn it into performance. That's partly, you know, any of your students that are doing sports psych. I mean, that's the strength of our sports psychologists, is helping us take some of those things which on a normal person would be, you know, you'd be decimated if you're stressed like that. Athletes can learn to use that, and I've seen that in so many sports where you use that moment. I mean, watch Lewis Hamilton last weekend, right? He went from 10th on the grid to win that. That is pure management of his frustration. You know, some people have crashed on the first corner. I know he has on occasion, but you know, he took that frustration, that anger, that competitiveness, that desire, and he put it into winning a race. So that ambition is not about putting undue pressure on people. It's about giving them an aspiration to help them train on those days when it's wet and cold and nobody wants to do it, to put in those hours that no one else wants to do, to say no to that party where everybody else is going. That's the ambition. And you know, whether you talk to a Chris Hoy in cycling or you talk to a Helen Glover in rowing, these are people that have a sort of myopic focus on being the best. And so you've got to set that challenge if you really are going to inspire people to put in the time, the effort, the commitment that you need them to have. If I said, oh, well, we're just hoping to finish in the top 4, they'll say, we've done that before. You've got to set an ambitious target. It doesn't mean you put an unbearable pressure. And Serena, who's joined us this from 1st of September, is, in my view, one of the best coaches in the world. And I don't mean one of the best women's coaches in the world. I mean one of the best coaches in the world. She is absolutely revered in the Netherlands. Her statue is next to the men's statues as one of the greatest coaches in the country has ever seen. And what is brilliant about her is not only is she very, very focused, well-planned, performance-orientated, but she likes to have fun too. And these players are realising that you can relax and enjoy but still have intensity and focus. So, yeah, it's an ambitious target. Serena believes it's possible, and so do I. You know, things may happen. You know, you get injuries and key players drop out, and that can affect what you do. But you have to start with that ambition.
I love the way you talk about psychology being used as a driver, so the pressure being used as a driver, and I hope our psychology students in the audience are listening to that. So I also have read that there's been a shortage of coaches, particularly for women's football. Is that a measure of how popular the game has become, that we need more coaches? And if so, we have a huge amount of students that want to become coaches in this audience. So that's presumably quite good news for them, because it means there's hopefully a job for them when they finish their studies.
Well, the game is growing at an incredible rate now. I mean, if we achieve our ambition and get football into every school by 2024, and we achieve our club strategy ambition, which is to provide 1,000 clubs with a proper competitive pathway for girls from 8, 10, 12, 14, that should be a really good news for anybody who wants to coach, because clubs are going to need coaches that can work with girls and women. And I don't think that just means women. I do think men can equally do a very good job. I do think it's different coaching girls. And I think as long as you're prepared to understand those differences, just simple things like language can be really, girls can pick up language and find it offensive, whereas boys would probably just dust it off. That there are differences in the way we speak to girls and the way we can, but it doesn't mean men can't do that. And indeed, there are some excellent male coaches in the Women's Super League. But I think when we decided to turn the Women's Super League in 2018 to a full-time professional league, we changed a lot, and that included a real commitment to referees working at the highest, women referees working at the highest level, and more women in coaching. And the lead on coaching is my colleague Audrey Cooper, and Audrey has done a phenomenal job since she came in 4 years ago. She's driven some real change. And just to give you an example, right now, she's running a coaching excellence initiative, which is for our top women coaches who are either working in the Championship or the Super League, to really help them prepare to work in what is now an extremely high-profile professional environment. So coaching at the beginning stages, I think, is massive opportunities. I think if you have an ambition to travel that journey, you have to recognize that the nature of what you do changes as the players you work with change. And I think, and the professionalization of the game at the top end as means that as coaches, you're now more in profile, you're under more pressure, if you want to think of it that way. I think Mark Skinner was talking about that, who's the new Manchester United guy. I think he was talking about that this week, that coaches are starting to feel the pressure now because there's so much more profile, and we've got this new broadcast deal, which means we've got 3 live games most weekends. So I think there is a huge opportunity for coaching. I think it's, I spent 10 years of my life at the National Coaching Foundation. I'm absolutely committed to coaching, as we are in the women's game. And I think you'll see a wealth of opportunities appearing at community level and further up the pathway.
It sounds as though from your career and everything you've done that firstly, volunteering is important. You know, you've got to volunteer, especially young people, to gain experience and get doors open for you. And also the education is important. Would you agree that those two strands have been a theme for you?
Yeah, I mean, my first 10 years of coaching were all voluntary, you know, and I think just different experiences. I think don't trap yourself into one experience, you know, work through it and then go and do something different. I think it's important. You know, I know when you're young, you sort of feel like you should have a sort of clear linear line on a journey you're going on. It's not like that, really. It dips and troughs and it comes and goes. And so I think it's really important to get lots of variety, lots of varied opportunities to try different things and to find the thing that really drives your passion, as I did. If you're working in a job which you're passionate about, you're not really working. I mean, I've often said jokingly, I've never done a day's work in my life because I've never really felt that I'm grinding or I'm having to do something I don't want to do. Of course, like everybody else, I get tired and some days I don't want to get up in the morning like everyone else, but that's not what I mean. But when I get to work, I'm energized by it because I love it. And I think that's massively important. So if coaching's your thing, you know, there are lots of ambitions you can set, you know, whether that's performance coaching or whether that's working at a community level and changing lives using football as your tool in inner city areas, working with disadvantaged groups. It's what drives you that is going to make you a great professional. And that's really important.
One of the things that we love to ask our guests for that life lesson, you know, when we have these sessions is, I'm sure you'll admit to having made mistakes along the way. How have you dealt with the mistakes you've made? You know, how do you handle criticism? How do you handle the mistakes you've made? And what are your coping mechanisms when that happens?
I don't think anybody likes criticism. I've not met, I mean, I think if you do, there's something a bit odd about you. But what I think when you get constructive criticism, while it might sting and you have to take it away and think about it, it's probably when you learn most. You know, it's like mistakes. At the time, it's horrible. You know, I can think of a few things where, you know, it almost makes me go goosebumpy thinking about them now. But I learned probably more from my mistakes than the things I got right. And that, I know that's a sort of strange thing to say, but it's not the mistake itself. It's your ability to step back after it, have a really good look at it, and learn the lessons that come out of it. That's why when I manage people, I take that same approach, which is it's okay to make a mistake. I would sooner you were ambitious and having a go, and if you make a mistake, then let's have a look at why, let's have a think about it, and let's see what we learn from it. And I think that's, you know, that sounds very wise. And when I was younger, I probably wasn't that wise, but I certainly know I can go back and I can think of those moments that I learned most from, and they're usually where I got something horribly wrong. You know, whether that was in the politics of the boardroom, whether it was as a coach, whether it was as a player. You know, those are the moments I believe that define you. You know, when things are going well, it's easy. The moments that define you is when life throws you a real spanner.
And are there any other traits that have made you become this effective leader? Because you've had to be an effective leader. That's a great example you've just given us. Can you think of any others you can throw into the mix that, you know, can pass on? What's going to help our people become leaders?
Good listening. You know, to lead people, you have to know them and understand them, and you have to build trust. And trust is not about you talking about yourself. Trust is about them believing you care about them and that you're interested in them, and that when you say we're going over that hill or we're going that way, they don't go, hang on a minute, she's doing this for herself. They go, we're coming with you, because they know you're doing it for the cause. So it's being able to explain to other people the mission and why it's important. And if I give you an example, when I was at UK Sport, government funded us, and so did lottery, and we were 10th in the medal table. And I asked my colleagues, who do you work for? And they all looked, they thought I was a daft old bat or something. They all looked at it and they all went, "Oh, we work for UK Sport." I said, "No, you don't actually." And they went, "Oh, so who do you work for?" "Oh, the government then, because they pay." "No, you don't work for them either." "Who do you work for?" "Lottery." "No." I said, "You know what? I'm going to go and make a cup of coffee. Have a chat amongst yourselves. And when I come back, see if anybody can tell me who you think you work for." And I came back and I said, "So who do you work for?" And they went, "Athletes." I said, "Now we're in business, okay? If every decision we make from here is made in the best interest of the athletes, they'll probably be the right decisions." And I think it's really important that as you develop as a leader, that you don't lose focus on who you're working for, and you're not working for yourself. And I think a lot of people get absorbed, in their own career and driving ambition and want to do this, but never lose sight of why, never lose sight of what is the purpose. If all of it is about earning more money and being more important, forget it. You're not going to make yourself happy, and you're probably not going to have a huge impact. If you want to lead, you've got to care about the people around you, and you've got to want to take them with you, because you believe the journey you're on together is going to make a real difference to you, to them, and to the people you're working with. So never losing sight of why you do the job is really important.
Is that the sort of advice you would have given yourself, knowing what you know now, if you were starting again? Is that those the sort of tips you would tell yourself?
Yeah, very much so. I think, I was no great intellect at school. I didn't get a good exam results, and I wasn't a great intellectual at college. I did go on and do a master's degree because I got fascinated by behaviour, and so I did a sports psych degree in behaviour management stuff. But I went with my intuitive love of sport, and then realised that I got the greatest joy, whether I was coaching or teaching or running UK Sport, out of seeing others achieve. That's where I get my excitement from. Not me, because I'm a part of the tool. I'm a part of the vehicle. But for me, standing at that closing ceremony at the Olympics in London 2012, and knowing we'd set a target of hitting 65 medals and had hit them, we got 65 medals, was just 65 people whose dreams had come true. 65 people who we had enabled to live that dream, to travel that journey, and to be the best in the world at what they did. That can be that you can't explain that unless you can feel it. And I think for me, just follow your dream, follow your passion, work hard, be resilient, because you're going to need to be, because things don't go as you always want them to. But never lose focus on the importance of the work that you're doing. And never let anyone tell you sport is trivial or not important, or it's absolutely central to people's lives. And football particularly, probably the most powerful brand in terms of affecting change in society. So, go and change the world, it'd be my advice.
That's a massive statement, isn't it? You talk about that pride at the end of the Olympics. However, there was a journey that had to start, wasn't there, when the game finished, which was the legacy. Just briefly, can you look back at where we were in 2012 and how far we've come now in legacy terms?
I'm not sure we capitalised on it in the way we should. Several things happened at London 2012. One was the emergence of women medalists. So we'd gone from, I think, I can't remember the exact numbers now, but maybe 15% of medals won by women in Sydney to 49% or 48% in London. So suddenly we had this emergence of the Helen Glovers and the Catherine Grangers and all those personalities, Jess Ennis-Hill. Suddenly women were kind of our heroines. I don't know we did enough at that moment to translate that, because the great thing about those events are they're inspirational, but it's how you translate it into participation. You know, so you look and you know you're not going to be Jess Ennis-Hill, but can we help you understand the value of being fit, of being well, of being, you know, your personal best? I don't think we did enough. And the other big one was disability. I mean, the Paralympics in London, I don't think will ever be matched again. It was phenomenal. The audiences poured through the doors. I mean, it was unbelievable. I stood in stadiums, tears pouring down my face. As much at the response of the audience as to the actual performances. Did we really capitalise on that? I don't think we did. So when it comes to the Women's Euros, we started our legacy work 2 years ago. So legacy shouldn't happen after. It's about really preparing the ground so that when that youngster goes into that stadium and they get that inspiration, or that oldster, you know, goes in, gets that moment, gets that infusion of energy and wants to do something, they don't turn around and there's nothing there to do. So for us, in those 8 host cities, we have laid unbelievable groundwork so that anyone who goes into that stadium, gets inspired, can find somewhere to play our game. That's legacy. But you've got to do all your homework before, not after. It's too late. If you take hockey as an example, you know, hockey did really well in London. All these little girls rushed to hockey clubs and they said, oh, sorry, we're full. Can you come back in a year? Well, no, they don't come back in a year, I'm afraid. So you've got to do all that preparation before you do the inspirational moment, not do the inspirational moment and then do the legacy. So I don't think we made the most of it by a long way.
But you do sound rightly confident that the picture of women's football going forward is healthy.
I'm really excited about where we are. I think we're only, you know, if we were in a 400-meter race, I'd say we still haven't reached the top bend. You know, I think there's a long way still to go, but the game is accelerating, just like a 400 meters. You know, it's coming off that bend that's going to make the difference. It's what we do in the next few years as we come off that bend into the home straight, where the game will be established in a certain way. And it's about ensuring the women's game represents the best of women's sport in every way, on the pitch, as coaches, as referees, and in our relationship with fans and the audience. So lot to do, but yeah, I'm really excited. I have an amazing team of people working on the women's game. They're all excellent. And you know, the new broadcast deal has given us unbelievable opportunities for people to watch the game. And we've got great sponsors like Barclays and Vitality and Weetabix now really investing in the women's game. So yeah, I'm really excited by it all.
Fantastic. So 2 more questions from me. We're coming towards the end. I know you said you were meant to be part-time and obviously trying to get the golf handicap down a little bit, but are there still 1 or 2 challenges that you want to fulfill? I mean, you sound so passionate all through this about what you have done and what you're still doing. Are there a couple of boxes you want to tick off yet? What does the future hold for you?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, particularly by Mark. Once keeps asking me, how long are you staying? And I don't know whether that's an invitation to leave. I haven't worked that out yet. Do you know, I and again, this might sound frivolous, but all the way through my life, I haven't planned the next step. The next step's arrived, and something will either come into my mind or into my aura. But while I'm doing this and enjoying it, and you know, I feel I'm making a difference, then I'll keep going until Mark shows me the exit. Which, you know, as I say, he keeps asking me, so maybe he's getting ready.
No, he's got plans for you. I'm sure he has. Don't worry. So you've given us so many what we call nuggets, you know, golden nuggets of advice all the way throughout this call. But as a wrap up, you know, picture the scene. We've got students huddled around their computers and laptops listening to you this morning, inspiring them. Can you give them a final takeaway message? What's the Sue Campbell message to the youngsters that dream about a career in sport and some that dream of following, you know, in your footsteps? What message would you send them away with today?
1, I'd love to be 18, 19 again, have another go at it all. Look, I think the world is changing around us. I think, you know, I'm sure many of you have watched the environmental issues that we're all facing, the societal issues we're facing around diversity, and the challenges we've got with sedentary lifestyles, and now, you know, the problem with things like COVID. I don't think this will be the last, unfortunately. I would say you are in the most fortunate place in the world to be working in sport. And you may not see politicians say, you know, people in sport are the saviors of society, but you have a chance to really make a difference. You have a chance to change. I'll just give you one last little thing. There's an American poster, which I have in the house, which says, when you die, I'm hoping not to, but when you die, no one will know how big your house was. No one will remember what car you drove. But if you change the life of a single child, you will be remembered. And that's what you have in your hands. So you go and make the most of it, follow your passion, follow your dream, but most importantly, change those lives and make sure that you're a real advocate for the very best of sport.
What a great message. Absolutely fantastic. Sue, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. As the host of these events, I don't always tell if they've gone quickly or slowly by whether I'm stifling the yawns or whether I'm glancing at the clock and thinking, oh wow, the hour's up, oh wow, the hour. For me, it's raced by. I hope it's been okay for you. I hope it's been okay for our students. All those people listening, go and shout about this morning with Sue Campbell, the lessons you've learned, the messages you've heard. Sue, hopefully you'll come back and join us again. Maybe after the World Cup, you can show us the trophy. Come and show us the trophy when you've
we'll do that.
Yeah, we wish you all the best, and we thank you for joining UCFB today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good luck to everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Been
you.
a pleasure. Bye-bye. Bye.